Awesome. So, first question, obvious question. For those that may not be aware that you have long been into whiskey, specifically Scotch,
Mhm.
what was your first experience with getting involved in the whiskey world, specifically Scotch and the Balvenie?
Um, Actually, I mean, professionally speaking,
Mhm.
it was developing Quest for Craft, which, um, I'll say that Balvenie's Quest for Craft is kind of my personal masterclass, if you
Mhm.
will. It's a masterclass that kind of allows me to nerd out on um my peers or friends
Yeah.
in a professional setting without without freaking them out, uh, if you will. So it's I like I like dissecting the process of um, how things are created. I mean, based on what I've done, like writing books like
Right.
Creative Quest and whatnot.
Yeah.
I really like looking under the hood, and so I was kind of looking for a way to amplify that more.
Yeah.
And because the Balvenie sort of allows, well, there's a commonality there as well, but um, they allowed me their space and their platform to kind of explore things I'm interested in. Because oftentimes, when we look at celebrities or those in certain professions, we're not asking these types of questions. Like we want to know,
What's
you
the
know,
latest projects? And yeah.
or that, or who they're dating and all that stuff. And that I do believe that, especially after the pandemic,
Yeah.
um, that there are a lot of us that are just making life pivots and trying to figure out ways. I discovered early that creativity is transferable, if
Yeah.
you will. Like I just don't do music. I can do other things just as creative. And if you find a commonality, then I think that's when you're in the sweet spot. So um, they allowed me to do that, and I couldn't think of a better partner.
I love that. And you're so right. I think sometimes it's so easy for fans to forget that, okay, you're more than just this drummer, you're more than DJing. You've written books, you have creative quests. You just actually this the illustrated book, The Idea of You, is that what it's called?
Yeah,
Correct?
the idea in you. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have that going on. I mean, you have so many irons in the fire. So I think it's great that you're able to tap into all of these different facets of your personality and creativity. So with that in mind, I'm thinking back to classic Roots albums. So Game Theory, we'll go way
Hmm.
back. That's like mid
Yeah.
2000s.
Hmm.
So if you had to put a Balvenie expression with that album and pair it, which one would it be and why?
Probably the I probably picked the 12,
Oh,
you know.
that's the one. Yep.
Well, yeah, when I throw a lot of what's weird you mentioned that because I think around 2006,
Mhm.
2007, like we've always, for us in the Roots organization, like us in the jam session or gatherings,
Mhm.
um that's always been a part of our kind of our repertoire. I mean, there's the Roots that people know professionally, like
Yeah.
buying records and seeing shows, but then there's other parts of the Roots that maybe our everyday audience doesn't know about.
Mhm.
um and I've continued that tradition. Previously it was from a creative standpoint, like having jam sessions,
Yeah.
and then uh kind of having food and drink served by like a top chef or a top uh uh drink expert on
Mhm.
standby. But then there was a point where I started doing the reverse once we got to the Tonight Show. So um actually, now that I think about it, I used to do these things called food salons,
Mhm.
and food salons are Um, they were my way to kind of conduct social experiments where I would try to basically see what happens if I invite like five of my songwriter friends and three of my author friends and two of my director friends and six of my comedy friends and some sports people and sort of mix them all together and see what happens. And um, that's actually how that was the beginning of my relationship with Balvenie. And then after the food salons,
Mhm.
then we took it a level higher. Like how can we actually partner up? I mean, it's one thing to just be like, okay, we'll set up a workstation over there, but
Yeah.
um, I've always used them in all my social things, even like when I do my game nights, which I guess now
Oh
is
man, that looks fun. Yeah.
trying. I mean, I don't want it to become a thing, which is why I don't necessarily like go super hard on my social media and that sort of thing. Like
Hmm.
game night to me is the equivalent of charging your iPhone. Like sometimes creatives have to get together and do something else.
Yeah.
And maybe in doing something else, hopefully something becomes of it. So
Yeah, I
that's what
love
that's
that.
for. But yeah, to answer your question, I'll say the 12.
And why
Um,
do you say the 12?
it's a certain level of spice. I mean, but it depends. Like there's the 14, there's also the sometimes I'm lucky enough to have access to the Balvenie 21
Ooh,
also for those that are into scotch
yeah.
also. Mix the two, but it's spicy and they do a lot of creative things with their mixes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very cool. And then looking ahead, so we're entering season 4,
Yeah.
and some of the people that, well, I looked over a couple of the episodes, but I know there's Common, Bill
Mhm.
Hader, America Ferrera, and then Lin-Manuel, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So with those this season and then looking back at the prior seasons, how do you feel like you've changed it up a bit while maintaining a level of consistency, kind of similar to what they have to do with quality control with Scotch in Balvenie?
Um, I think, well, as I said earlier, that all creativity
Hmm.
is transferable. Like be you a magician or whiskey maker or spirit expert or um you know a, a an author, a writer, uh a person in sports. Um this particular season I say is probably the closest to my heart. Like each episode and each season has their own themes.
Hmm.
Um but weird enough, especially for 2024,
Hmm.
I'm at a place in my life now where I'm about exploring uh things that normally don't delve into. Like I think because I realize I'm such a creature of habit, um, I don't want to be predictable, and I know that in order to grow as a creative and as a human, you gotta get to a place where you start doing things that you normally wouldn't do, like stop being so habitual. So the four themes that we did this year,
Hmm.
um, in other words, like Lin Manuel, his episode's about persistence. Um, he like I know his like I tease him to this day. Like who goes on vacation with a 700-page novel and reads the entire book like on vacation? Of course, that wound up changing the world with Hamilton. So, um, Lin Manuel is a very persistent person. Like all of his projects sort of all take they're shy under a decade. You
Yeah.
know, um, I'm kind of in this situation right now. Speaking of game theory, like the Roots have been working on this new album for 10 years now. So it's it's time to put the baby to bed and have it out by next year. But um in America Ferrera,
Hmm.
self-reflection uh is part of her thing. And she always has whenever she takes on a role, she kind of uh sees what part of herself is in the character that she's about to portray, and what in her real life can she add to it so that it can become her role. And we get into it about what we now affectionately call the speech, uh,
Oh,
her Barbie speech. Um, Bill Hader's uncertainty, like that, doing that actually helped me. Like of all the, of course, Common's authenticity, but
yeah.
with Hader's uncertainty episode, that helped me because one of the main challenges I had this year,
Mhm.
I kind of try to do four things that are out of my comfort zone, or like that whole idea of facing your fears.
Yeah.
And for me, one of the shocking revelations is kind of my I won't say fear, but my trepidation in playing free jazz. And kind of my solution was to do a round of shows at the Blue Note this year.
Mhm.
Actually, when I get done with you, I'm gonna start talking to Robert Glasper about what we're going to do
Oh,
next week for Robtober, his infamous residency,
cool. Yeah.
the Blue Note. So like uncertainty, uh, I mean, as someone that's known for thinking quick on his feet and adjusting to any environment or situation,
Mhm.
for me, free jazz is kind of a way to get out that because you just don't know where it's going to happen, and how it connects,
Yeah.
and like how it connects
Yeah.
uh, to the Balvenie, of course, is um, I would say that uh, their their process uh, of how they craft their whiskey and how they um, like just the level of from literally from the barrels to like every process of how they make it is almost as studied and prepared as the way that I make music. And sometimes you have to uh like have room for experimentation,
Yep.
like the idea of crafting in barrels that were formerly Scotch barrels, but gives a
Yeah.
different aroma and mixing and that sort of thing.
Yep.
um and that's something I didn't know before, that I previously didn't know before, that it's not as rigid and controlled, that sometimes there is room for experimentation, and that's a really
Yeah.
curious thing for me, so I can go
Yeah.
on about that.
And you actually, that ties in really well with just bringing this all together. So that correlation between barreling or finishing in certain cask and to bottling and just the whole
Hmm.
process of distillation, and then comparing that even with music, or whether it's live and you're having these jam sessions or even when you're in the studio, there's different components, and you'll know when it's done, just like it is with the whiskey. So
Yeah,
where do you feel like creatively, and you can tie this back in with my Scotch analogy as well, but
yeah,
creatively, when do you know something is complete and that you're pleased with it, and that's it for quality control as an artist, as
that is,
Questlove and Scotch too?
you know that's the lesson I'm learning right now. Probably one of the greatest. So I work here at 30 Rock.
All right.
um I've been here at the Tonight Show for 16 years, and I consider this 30 Rock University, whereas anyone else just says, "Hey, I work at the Tonight Show," or "I work at Saturday Night Live." But I remember my interview with Lauren Michaels uh 16 years ago, I think,
Mhm.
and he said something really curious. He says, because he's very familiar with artists that like overthink and stay in their heads and whatnot.
Yeah.
And he says that, and I asked him, like, well, have you ever just thought, like, why don't we just pre-tape Saturday Night Live once? And he says, here's the deal. We never have to worry about um, whether or not a show is perfect or a show is ready. he says that exactly 11:29 p.m. every Saturday,
Hmm.
that's when that's when it's time to let it go. Like most artists will hoard and try to perfect, and that's really like a psychological fear
Hmm.
happening. But for him, it's like we don't we're never ready to present Saturday Night Live, but we know that 11:29, what we have is what it is. And so he says that Saturday Night Live isn't ever perfected. Saturday Night Live is ready to be unleashed at 11:29 every Saturday that they're in season,
Yeah.
which I almost think is the kind of the uh, almost on the level of click your heels three times in your home, like that sort of
Yeah.
Dorothy thing. But it's actually the truth. Like
Yeah.
you just never know. Like I think that if most creatives, some creatives wind up someplace by accident.
Hmm.
Hence what I was telling you about, like when I was really curious about them sometimes mixing their whiskey with Scotch caskets, and aren't they worried about like this not blending in well and that sort of thing? But sometimes you wind up in a happy accident, and it is what it is. Like I Pee Wee Herman once said, "I meant to do that." So that's I agree. I agree with that wholly. So I don't think any particular art or creative outcome is ever ready and always has room for perfection, but it's ready the moment where you just say, I'm done, and you place it there and you unleash it in the world.
Love it. That's a good
Yeah.
like mic drop moment. Yes.
Yeah.
Love that.